We want to talk about the rise and rise of Rog, who's now the Supremo in La Rochelle. They're going.
Oh, very good. I see what you did there, Pat. His rise has just been extraordinary, hasn't it? I don't know what the ceiling is, but certainly he's hitting quite a ceiling with La Rochelle at the moment. It's just so impressive.
Now, we can talk about events of the weekend, which we will in a moment, because, you know, the shadow of Ronan loomed over Johnny Sexton for a while, and then perhaps with Johnny Sexton's tremendous success at out half, the shadow of Johnny Sexton loomed over Rog, and maybe that was obliterated partly last year and totally this year.
Yeah, there's that famous photograph of at the Aviva Stadium during one of those great Leinster-Munster battles where Johnny Sexton's standing over Ronan O'Gara and shouting in his face as Ronan gets up off the ground. They had I wouldn't quite say a hatred, but a distaste for each other on the pitch, certainly for a number of years.
And who was going to be the number one to take the 10 jersey for Ireland?
Exactly. So a lot of battles there. And then, of course, the time that Sexton had at Racing brought the two of them closer together. Ronan O'Gara was defence coach with Racing 92 while Johnny Sexton was there, so they became really close and get on very well. There was that incident at halftime at the weekend that we're hearing about.
Now this was I think Leinster being smart or smart-assed, whichever way you want to put it, because they knew that Rog had got at the ref last year, and so they were determined not to let him near the ref at half-time. So do you know what happened?
Well, it's mind games. So the reports that we know of, Pat, that what happened was, as you say, last year Wayne Barnes, I think, was the referee for that game in Marseille. Ronan O'Gara made a beeline at half-time to Wayne Barnes' office, the referee's office at half-time, to say a few words and maybe get in the referee's ear ahead of the second half decisions to come. Leinster noticed that last year and they decided this year we're not going to let that happen. So Sean O'Brien, who of course wasn't talked out for Leinster, was manned or posted to the referee's door at halftime at the Aviva Stadium at the weekend. Sure enough, Ronan O'Gara comes along and decides to have his few words with Jaco Piper, the South African referee. O'Brien stands there and I guess doesn't let him. A few words are exchanged, a few F-bombs were told as well. It all lasted about 30 seconds.
So nothing to it?
Nothing to it, really. Johnny Sexton came in and a few words were shouted back and forth. Handbags, I think you'd call it, really. Verbal handbags. So nothing major, but it's a little spicy story that we
now, had Leinster won, that might have loomed large in the La Rochelle aftermath, but it didn't. La Rochelle won.
This is the thing, and there was also talk. Ronan O'Gara spoke to after the game about driving to the match, and Leinster fans. He said, "I don't like a certain cohort of the Leinster support." Leinster supporters were jeering and a few different gestures towards the La Rochelle players on the bus. He said the La Rochelle team used that. And that's one thing Ronan O'Gara's coaching is brilliant for, using minute little things like that you can hypothetically hang on the dressing room wall and use to your advantage. And clearly the La Rochelle players were pumped, maybe not quite from the off, because the first 20 minutes we saw what Leinster did, but certainly they came back into the game.
Yeah, we've analysed the game before, but obviously there were some key mistakes. Offering 6 points in very easy kickable penalties to La Rochelle was the winning and losing of the game. A few missed kicks as well, which determined the ultimate outcome. But let's go back with Ronan, from being a player, and for any player, when your time is up, what to do next? Yeah,
it's a decision, and clearly for Ronan O'Gara, that decision, it was a tough one, because I remember towards the end of his playing days, certainly with Munster, there were talks of a contract extension and playing on further with Munster, but he clearly had a graw for coaching and wanted to get into coaching. I think he has that leadership style that every single player that's ever played with him really was not surprised whatsoever that he was heading into the coaching sphere.
Is he mouthy?
He's very, very composed and very much a people person. Culture is a word that Ronan O'Gara seems to use quite often. Even La Rochelle's celebrations at the weekend, you saw, ordinarily when a team wins a trophy like that, it's just the players and the wider squad celebrating. He had the families of the players involved as well. His mother Joan was on the pitch with him and all of his kids and different elements of his family as well. So he's bringing a people culture. Antonio, the French prop for La Rochelle, has said he has been the key. This is last month he was speaking. Ronan O'Gara is the key to this team.
Yeah. I'm told that they, in their own dressing room in the Aviva, they had pictures, Ronan, of his family and his mother. I'm not sure how true all of this is, but the lads were encouraged to bring with them, mementos of home for motivation.
100%. And Ronan said that as well. He said his mother sadly wasn't able to go to the match last year. She had a bit of a fall and some damage to her brain, which he spoke about afterwards as well. So she's only getting back to full health. But I think incidents like that and little moments over Ronan's career, and he has 5 kids as well, so he's very busy, but family has been so important to him. He realises that this is really just sport at the end of the day. So Leinster, of course, will be disappointed. But I think win, lose or draw, Ronan O'Gara has such a mentality, and he's built it into his team that, look, there are more important things to worry about. That's why they win.
Now, tell me just his trajectory when he started coaching, where, and then his journey through New Zealand and so on, ultimately to France and finally to La Rochelle.
Yeah, if you look at the trajectory he's been on, it's a graph that has only served to rise since the very outset, and I honestly think it's going to continue to rise, because July 2013 he starts off with Racing as a defence coach, agrees a contract extension with them in 2016. So clearly they were happy with his trajectory and how he was going. Was brought into an Irish squad as well for a one-off skills coach session over in the United States as well. So clearly he was on the international radar, and didn't quite see out the contract with Racing, which went till 2019. But in 2018, as you say, goes to New Zealand, assistant backs coach first of all. So you're starting at the bottom rung of the ladder in New Zealand. But if you look at the success, Super Rugby, they win in 2019. He wins it again the following season and defends it. So there's success just seems to follow him around, Ronan O'Gara. Then of course comes into La Rochelle. First year gets into the Heineken Champions Cup final where they lose to Toulouse in the final, and now has won back-to-back finals since. So the trajectory was remarkable. Even when John O'Gibbs, he comes into La Rochelle and John O'Gibbs is there as his kind of not joint coach. They both have different roles in the setup. But then Gibbs leaves and Rog takes firm sole control. Now, of course, he has Donnacha Ryan and a massive backroom team behind him, and he speaks very, very fondly about them, but he's the key.
Now, he's been spoken of as a potential Ireland coach someday. You've been talking to him?
Yeah, well, listen, he spoke to our own Aisling O'Reilly on Off the Ball after the match in the Aviva Stadium at the weekend, and it's funny because he's so open and honest with the media when he speaks, but it's funny, Aisling, you'll hear it in this clip, puts the question to him, and he straight away himself interjects with his own international ambitions. Have a listen.
What is the ambition for Ronan O'Gara as a coach? Where do you see yourself? I know back-to-back champions now at La Rochelle, but where do you see yourself in the future?
Of course you want to test Coach Ireland, that's always been the goal, but I think what you do gets you that job. There's no hard luck stories, you know. If you're the best candidate you get it, if you're not someone else gets it, but I'm giving it my best shot. But I must admit I enjoy the journey. I put a huge emphasis on hopefully having a healthy family and me being healthy, and I don't really look long term.
Don't really look long term, but clearly he did. He said, this is what it's all about ultimately to coach Ireland. But he's not particularly interested in doing that tomorrow, and nor is there a vacancy immediately, although one might be looming. But Brian O'Driscoll saying that Paul O'Connell really is next in line. Yeah,
that he's ahead of him maybe in the pecking order. That was interesting comments from Brian O'Driscoll on Off the Ball last night. I found that fascinating. Maybe that's because Paul O'Connell is involved in the Irish setup and there's a continuity element there, that Paul O'Connell would be the natural successor. But you can't really look past Ronan O'Gara as someone who has to be considered. Clearly he has ambitions for that job. He was linked heavily with the England head coach role, if you remember, before they brought their new man in, and that's probably part of that was him getting his new contract with La Rochelle and signing the new deal for more money. So he will be the Irish head coach at some point in the future. Whether he's the next head coach remains to be seen, I guess, Pat.
Oh, well, he wants to perfect his French. He still needs to work a little bit on that.
He's getting there.
Finally, I should say, you mentioned he's calm. But he's had disciplinary issues in France this year.
More than a few, Pat. So I'm just looking through the list of issues he's had. It went back to November 2021. He doesn't register his position in the team sheet for La Rochelle as one of the coaches. That leads to a disagreement, polite disagreement, I have to say, with one of the fourth officials. Banned for 6 weeks for, quote, disrespecting a match official. That was after a fixture against Lyon in September of last year, and another disciplinary hearing for alleged comments made towards a match official. There have been fines. There have been different incidents where he's had to sit out weeks on end. So clearly a fiery individual, but that's what you want in the dressing room, is it? And he's been very calm as well in his dealings with the media. Open, honest. Like, this is a man who happily joins us every week on the show, even in the build-up to massive games like last week. So he's clearly not afraid to say what he feels. You heard in that clip there as well. So yes, he has his run-ins with disciplinary issues, But I mean, overall, his demeanour would lead you to being a calm
I suppose
man.
we should have seen shades of things to come in his punditry, which was very precise and very knowing and very knowledgeable.
Very insightful, and he even talks about his own coaching style of KBA, keep ball alive. He brings that into the play with La Rochelle, and you can see that even the stressing the importance of defensive play. His coaching style is just incredible. So where the career brings him, Pat, I think we're all absolutely desperate to see.
All right, Shane Hannon from Off the Ball, thank you very much.